I worked the night shift at a motel until something drove me out. I wish I could say I ignored the warnings because I don't believe in ghosts, but the truth is, I needed the job. It was a small roadside motel, the kind you'd drive past without a second thought. A relic from the 70s with flickering neon signs and a musty carpet that no amount of air freshener could fix. The pay was shit. The guests were questionable, and my only coworker was a half-drunk night manager who barely stayed awake. But it came with one perk: a place to sleep. My room was actually just a storage space behind the front desk with a twin bed, a tiny nightstand, and a door that barely locked. Still, I told myself it was fine. I was alone for my first shift. The night manager had left around 11, leaving me with a list of duties: check in late guests, answer the phone, make sure no one trashed the place. Easy. I had brought a book, made myself some coffee, and settled in for a long, boring shift. By 1 a.m., the lobby was empty. No guests, no calls. Just the hum of the vending machine and the distant buzz of the motel's neon sign outside. It was peaceful in a weird, liminal space kind of way. Then I heard it. A voice. Low, muffled, just beyond the wall where my bed was. At first, I thought it was a guest. Maybe someone talking in the parking lot or on their phone. But as I listened, I realized it wasn't just one voice. There were several, whispering, talking over each other in hushed, urgent tones. It sounded like they were right on the other side of the wall, inside the front office. A jolt of panic shot through me. The front door was locked. No one had checked in for hours. So who the hell was in there? I grabbed my phone, my heart pounding. I wasn't about to investigate without backup. But before I could dial 911, the voices stopped. Instantly. Like they knew I was listening. I held my breath, straining to hear anything. Silence. I told myself it was my imagination. Maybe an echo from one of the rooms? Maybe the TV from 1A, where an old trucker had checked in earlier? I swallowed my nerves, put my phone down, and forced myself to lie back down. Then the toilet flushed. Not in one of the guest rooms, not down the hall. It came from the tiny staff restroom in the office. I sat up so fast I nearly fell out of bed. My hands were shaking. I knew I was alone. There was no one else here. No one had walked into that bathroom. I waited, my ears straining for any sound of movement. I figured if someone had broken in, I would hear them leaving the restroom. A door creaking open. Footsteps. Something. But nothing happened. I waited for what felt like forever, then forced myself to move. My legs felt like they weighed 100 pounds as I stepped out into the hallway. The front office was dimly lit, the only light coming from the dull glow of the computer monitor. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The chair was still tucked neatly under the desk. The vending machine hummed softly in the corner. The bathroom door was slightly ajar. I stared at it, my pulse roaring in my ears. The motel was old. Maybe the plumbing was acting up? That was logical. It had to be something like that. I reached out, pushed the door open all the way. Empty. I flipped on the light, my breath catching in my throat. The toilet seat was still moving slightly, like it had just been used. The water swirled down, then settled. I felt cold all over. I checked every inch of that tiny room. The cabinet under the sink, the supply closet, even behind the door, just in case someone was somehow hiding there. But it was just me. I backed out, locking the door behind me like that would somehow help. I went back to my room, locked that door too, and climbed under the blanket even though I wasn't the least bit tired anymore. I tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion, a trick of my tired mind. Maybe the plumbing really was just weird, but deep down, I knew better. The next night, I heard the voices again. At first, I tried to ignore it. The weird voices, the phantom toilet flushes, the doors that seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking. I brushed it all off as my imagination, or just the quirks of an old motel. I mean, old buildings make noise, right? That's what I told myself. But as the weeks went on, I couldn't keep lying. The whispers behind the walls never stopped. The murmurs felt like they were pressing in on me, some nights closer than others. And sometimes, I swore I heard my own name. I started sleeping with the light on, but even that didn't help. Every creak, every shift of the air felt like something was watching me. I was exhausted, barely making it through my shifts. That's when I asked my boyfriend, Jake, to stay the night. Jake wasn't the type to believe in ghosts. He was logical, skeptical, the kind of guy who'd roll his eyes at horror movies and mutter something about brain chemistry when I told him about the voices. Still, he agreed. If it'll help you get some sleep, I'll stay. But I'm telling you, babe, it's just an old building settling. I didn't care if he believed me. I just wanted someone else there. It was a freezing night in January. The motel sat off a quiet stretch of highway, far enough from the main road that all you could hear was the occasional hum of a passing car. My tiny back room was cold, despite the small heater humming in the corner. Jake and I huddled under the blanket, watching some random late-night TV. He dozed off around 2 a.m., but I stayed awake, listening. It was quiet. No voices, no creaks. For the first time in weeks, I actually started to relax. Maybe, just maybe, I had been imagining things. Then the knocking started. 3 sharp taps against the window, right beside my bed. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I turned my head, staring at the window. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the faintest outline of the glass pane. Another knock, more urgent this time. Jake stirred. "What's that?" he mumbled. I swallowed hard. I don't know. Still half asleep, he sat up and rubbed his face. Probably just a tree or something. That made sense. The wind outside had been picking up, and the motel had a few scraggly trees scattered around the lot. Maybe a branch was tapping against the glass. I exhaled, letting my body relax. Yeah, maybe. Then the knocking moved. It was at the door now. A slow, deliberate thud, thud, thud against the wood. Jake tensed beside me. "What the hell?" He swung his legs over the side of the bed, standing up. I grabbed his arm, my heart pounding. "Don't open it." "Why not?" He looked at me like I was overreacting. "It's probably just some drunk guest." He stepped toward the door. I wanted to stop him, but fear had me frozen. "Who's there?" he called out. Silence. Jake waited. Then, cautiously, he reached for the handle and cracked the door open an inch. Cold air rushed in, making me shiver. He peeked out, then turned back to me. "There's no one here." He opened the door wider, stepping into the hallway. I hesitated, then followed, clutching my hoodie around me. The hallway stretched out in both directions, dimly lit by a flickering overhead bulb. The door to the front lobby was still shut. No movement, no sound. Jake turned back toward me. "Told you when, babe. That's all." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something felt off. We went back inside, locking the door behind us. Jake climbed back into bed, already half asleep again. I tried to settle down too, but my nerves were still on edge. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see something peering in. Eventually, exhaustion won. I drifted off. I woke up to a heavy silence, the kind that made my skin crawl. Jake was still asleep beside me, his arm draped over his face. The heater had turned off sometime in the night, and the room was ice cold. I sat up, rubbing my arms, and glanced toward the window. Then I froze. There were no trees outside, not anywhere near my window. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Slowly, I got up and crossed the room, pulling back the curtain. The ground outside was covered in fresh snow. Untouched. Perfect. No footprints. No signs that anyone had stood there knocking. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Jake." My voice barely came out. I turned to him, shaking his shoulder. "Jake, wake up." He groaned, rolling over. "What?" I pointed at the window. "There are no trees." He blinked at me, then at the window. I watched as realization dawned in his tired eyes. He threw off the blanket and went to the door, yanking it open. Same thing. The snow outside the door was undisturbed. No prints, no sign that anyone had ever been there. But we heard it, he muttered, stepping back inside. His skepticism was slipping. I could see it on his face. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? He sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. Maybe it was an animal? In two places, first at the window, then at the door? He had no answer. For the first time, Jake looked genuinely unsettled. He was still trying to rationalize it, but I could see the doubt creeping in. Neither of us said much after that. Jake stayed with me one more night. And that's when things got worse. I don't know what I expected from that second night. Maybe for nothing to happen, so Jake could roll his eyes at me and say, "See? Just your imagination." Maybe for something to finally reveal itself, so I could prove to him and to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. What I didn't expect was for him to witness something so terrifying that he'd walk out of my life completely. After the knocking incident, Jake wasn't as dismissive. He didn't outright say he believed me, but he didn't crack any more jokes about old pipes or the wind. That was enough for me. I begged him to stay one more night. "Just to see if anything else happens," I said, my voice almost pleading. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "You're really that scared, huh?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. With a sigh, he agreed. "Fine. One more night. But after this, you need to get some real sleep, okay?" I nodded, but we both knew sleep wasn't happening. We stayed in my tiny back room for as long as we could stand it, but by midnight, Jake was restless. He wasn't used to just sitting in one place for hours. "I'm gonna grab some snacks from the vending machine," he said, stretching. "Want anything?" I shook my head. "Hurry back." He chuckled. "I'm literally going 20 feet away, babe." I watched as he left, the door clicking shut behind him. Alone again. The second he was gone, the air in the room felt wrong. He hadn't even been gone a full minute, but already the silence felt heavier. Pressing. The walls seemed closer. The dim light from the lamp flickered slightly, or maybe my tired brain was just playing tricks on me. Then, from the other side of the wall, I heard something move. A soft rustling. Like paper shifting. The motel lobby had a magazine rack near the front desk, full of old dog-eared travel brochures, casino ads, and local event flyers. I'd heard them move before when guests rifled through them, but this time I knew the lobby was empty. And yet I still heard the rustling, like someone was flipping through them. My heart clenched. I sat up straighter, straining to hear. Then, wham! A loud thud from the lobby. Then, before I could react, Jake screamed. Not a startled yelp. A full-on, guttural scream of pure terror. I launched myself off the bed and yanked open the door, my stomach in my throat. Jake stood in the middle of the lobby, breathing heavily, his fists clenched. The magazine rack was a mess. Brochures scattered all over the floor like a hurricane had torn through them. A few still fluttered in the air, drifting down slowly. He turned toward me, his face pale. "We're leaving." "What happened?" I demanded, rushing over. "Jake, what the hell?" He pointed at the rack, his hand shaking. "They flew at me." I blinked. "What?" "The brochures. They just flew off the rack, right at my face." His voice was tight, panicked. He was already backing toward the door. I stared at the mess on the floor, my pulse pounding in my ears. Jake wasn't the type to scare easily, but he was shaking. "You're sure no draft?" I started, but he cut me off. "Babe." He looked at me, and I'll never forget the way his eyes looked. Like he wanted to believe there was a logical explanation, but deep down, he knew better. There was no wind, no one else here. I walked past the rack, and He gestured wildly, struggling to find the words. Like something threw them at me. On purpose. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Jake took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and said, "I can't do this." At first, I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I can't stay here," he said, running a hand through his hair. He was still shaking, still pale. "And I can't watch you keep staying here either. You need to leave, too." I blinked at him, my stomach sinking. "You're leaving?" My voice cracked slightly. His jaw clenched. I won't come back here." It hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought he was scared for me, but he was scared for himself. "So what? You're just gonna walk out?" His expression softened, but he didn't step closer. He just sighed. "I love you, okay? But I can't be around this shit. I don't do ghosts, demons, whatever the hell this is. I can't. And I don't want you getting wrapped up in it either." "But I live here, Jake." My voice was getting higher, more desperate. "I work here." "Then quit." "Jesus, why are you still staying here after all this?" He threw up his hands. "This place is not normal, and you know it." I didn't have an answer, because he was right. But part of me didn't want to leave. Not yet. Maybe I was too stubborn. Maybe I wanted to understand what was happening. Maybe I was just too scared to admit that I should have run the first night I heard the voices. I expected Jake to stay, to try to comfort me, to promise that we'd figure it out together. Instead, he kissed my forehead, whispered, "I'm sorry," and walked out the door. And just like that, I was alone again. The motel had always felt eerie, but after Jake left, it felt different. The air inside the room was heavier, thicker. The silence was no longer just silence. It was waiting. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every little sound made my breath hitch. Every creak of the old building made my skin crawl. I wasn't just scared anymore. I was being watched. Not in the way you feel when someone stares at you from across the room. No, this was something deeper. More primal. Like whatever it wasn't just looking. It was waiting. For what? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay here much longer. After Jake left, the motel no longer felt like just a workplace. It felt like a cage. I don't know if it was because I was now completely alone or if something knew I was vulnerable, but the disturbances escalated. Before, it was just whispers, the occasional knock, the feeling of being watched. Now, it was worse. Much worse. And it all led to the night that finally broke me. I tried to stick it out. I really did. Even after Jake was gone, I told myself I just needed the job. That I was overreacting. That whatever was happening, it wasn't dangerous. But the motel had other plans. The first thing that changed was the furniture. I'd leave my room for a minute, just to grab a drink from the vending machine or check something at the front desk. And when I'd come back, something would be off. The chair in the corner, now facing the wall, the nightstand, a few inches to the left. It was subtle at first, enough that I second-guessed myself. But then one night, I watched it happen. I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone, trying to ignore the heavy silence pressing down on me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my chair. It moved. Not a little shift, not a wobble. It dragged itself across the floor, scraping against the old carpet. I sat up so fast my phone slipped from my hands. My breath hitched. My entire body went rigid. The chair stopped. For a long moment, I just stared at it, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't move it back. I didn't touch it. I didn't sleep that night. After that, doors started slamming on their own. Not just in my room, but throughout the entire motel. I'd be at the front desk, half asleep, when suddenly, bam! A door would slam shut somewhere down the hall. Sometimes it was a guest room. Sometimes it was the supply closet. Sometimes it was my room. but there was never anyone there. I wasn't the only one who noticed the motel was wrong. Guests mentioned strange noises. The cleaner, Maria, who came in the mornings, refused to go into certain rooms alone. The day manager, Rick, joked about the ghost, but avoided working the night shift at all costs. Then one night, a group of guests decided to test it. They were 3 college kids, maybe early 20s, staying for the weekend while passing through town. They checked in late, already tipsy, giggling about how sketchy the place looked. And one of them had a Ouija board. I should have stopped them. They set up in the lobby right near the front desk, placing the board on the coffee table. "You ever try one of these?" one of the guys asked me. I shook my head. Not interested. "Ah, come on." His girlfriend grinned. "Aren't you curious?" "Curious?" "Yes." "Stupid?" I refused to join, but I didn't leave. I stood behind the front desk, pretending to work, but really, I was listening. They started asking basic questions. "Is anyone here?" "What's your name?" That kind of thing. Nothing happened. They laughed, teased each other for moving the planchette, then got bored. But the moment they packed it up, the lights flickered. Every single bulb in the lobby dimmed for a second, just long enough for us to notice, then snapped back to normal. The group went quiet. "Okay, that was weird," one of them muttered. Then, from inside the front office, the supply closet door creaked open. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Neither did they. We just stared as the door, one I knew had been shut, slowly swung open, revealing nothing but darkness. "Yeah, nope," the girl said, standing up so fast she knocked over her drink. "I'm done." The guys laughed it off, but they packed up fast. And that night, they checked out early. I don't think they ever even went back to their room. The last night I worked there, I already knew I was done. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The motel was empty. No guests, no coworkers, just me. The quiet was unbearable. It wasn't real quiet. It was the kind that felt alive, like something was waiting. I sat behind the desk, staring at the computer screen, not really seeing it. My body was tense. My stomach was in knots. Then I heard it. A whisper. Not distant, not muffled. Right. Behind. "Mister." I spun around so fast my chair nearly tipped over. Nothing. The room was empty. I was breathing too hard. My skin was cold. I forced myself to sit back down, gripping the edge of the desk. "You're just tired. You're just tired." Then the computer monitor flickered. A low hum filled the air. Static vibrating through the room. The overhead lights flickered. The vending machine clicked. Then, the office door slammed shut. I screamed. I ran. I don't even remember grabbing my stuff. I don't remember unlocking the front door. I just remember bursting out into the cold night air, my breath ragged, my hands shaking. I didn't look back. I didn't even lock up. I just got in my car and drove. I quit the next morning. I didn't even go back in person. I just called Rick and told him I wasn't coming back. He didn't ask why. I think he already knew. For weeks after, I had nightmares. About whispers, about slamming doors, about something standing just behind me waiting for me to turn around. And sometimes, even now, I wonder, what if I had turned around that night? What if I had seen what was really there? Maybe it was just a ghost. A spirit trapped in that decaying motel, restless and harmless. Or maybe it was something worse. Something that had been waiting for me to be alone. Waiting for me to listen. Waiting for me to see it. I don't think I ever want to know. Subscribe now and never miss a story that will leave you speechless.